Welcome back everyone to the computer science for self-taught, and in this video which is the continuation of our previous tutorial about fragments, so we have studied that different types of fragments. We have got list fragments, dialog fragments, and its preference fragment. So we have already discussed about the list fragment and dialog fragment. So in today's video I'm going to teach you how you can use a preference screen in Android. So preference screen, it is mostly used to get information from user, especially they are used in settings. So if I open this application, if I close this app, so if I open this list, it is a preference screen. So it stores the user data inside a default share preference. So whatever you see in here, whatever modification and configuration you do in this list, it is stored inside a default share preference. So by using that default share preference, we can get the data of this list anywhere inside our application. So let's create a preference screen like this one. How to create it? So let's create a new Android project, and now I'm going to name this project our preference screen class. So I'm going to choose the marshmallow version, select an empty activity. So I leave everything as it is and I click finish. So you must remember the preference fragment. First we have got the preference screen, then we have got the preference fragment. Then in the upper version of Android, above the marshmallow, we have got PreferenceActivity for our settings. I have created a project as the name of preference screen class. So I'm going to main activity and I'm going to change the constant layout to relative layout. So I'm going to change this also, and I'm going to remove this. So in here I'm going to create two patterns like this one. So if I open this up, so I'm going to create a preference screen like this one. So if I click on show, it's gonna show the information in here, and if I click on store information, it's going to open my preference screen like this one. As you can see, you also have a preference screen like this one in any app you open. These preference screens are mostly used for user configuration. So if I type my name in here, so I'm going to type my name in here, Aliyah Ashar. Okay, I click OK. Then I'm going to set my password and I'm going to check this one. And the language, I'm going to choose my language as Dari or Farsi. So whenever I open the application, I still have the data, because all of these data inside the preference screen are going to store in a default share preference. Although we create our shared preferences manually, but these data inside this preference screen has stored in a default preference. So, and by using that default share preference, we are going to retrieve the data from this preference screen inside our application, in any part I mean, because all of data of this preference screen has stored inside a default shared preference. Because in Android, shared preference is used to store and retrieve primitive information. In Android, string, integer, float, double, everything is primitive, considered as primitive data type. So in Android, shared preferences are mostly used to store data in key and value pair, so we can retrieve the data on the basis of key. It is most widely used to get information from user, especially they are mostly used in these preference screen. So let's going to create an app like this. Okay, when I create back, when I click the show information, it's going to show my information in here. So let's create our preference screen. So in here I'm going to create a text view, and I'm going to make it as wrap content, hide also wrap content. I'm going to choose an ID for this one. I'm going to choose an ID show text data, and I'm going to put it in center vertical to true. Okay, and I'm going to check the default text data, and I'm going to set the text size 20 fp. Okay, and the text style bold and italic. Okay, and the text color should be this value. So now I'm going to create a button, wrap content. I'm going to choose an ID for this one, btn show information, and I'm going to choose a text for this one, show information, and I'm going to choose center horizontal to true. Okay, from margin top I'm going to give it 30 dp or 20 dp is enough. So I'm going to create another button for opening our preference screen. Wrap content. I'm going to choose an ID and btn store information. So I'm going to set the text for this one, text store information, and I'm going to put it at ID our btn show information, and I'm going to put the center horizontal to true and margin top, sorry about this, margin top 10 or 15 dp. Okay, so I'm going to change the text color for them. So I'm going to open the choose color, going to choose a color like this. So it's not good. What about this one? So I think it's great. Different color for this one. This is really great. So whenever the user clicks on the show information, it's going to get the data from preference screen and set that here, and whenever the user clicks on store information, it's going to open the preference screen for the user so that the user can do their modifications. So let's go to our main activity. So in here I have one text view, private text view, text data, and I have two buttons as the name of info and store. So I'm going to initialize them. Show info equals to button r.id.btn show information. Okay, store info btn store information. So now I'm going to handle their events, but I'm going to use a different way. So I'm going to use the onClick listener equals to view.onClick listener. Okay, make sure that you provide a semicolon here. Now I'm going to implement its method as the name of onClick. So whenever the user clicks on any of the button, how can we determine which button is clicked? So we have got view object in here. By using the view object, we can determine which button is clicked. So I'm going to use switch. You can use if else statement also. So I'm going to use switch v.get id. Make sure that you can get the ID of this, because I've given them an ID as the name of btn information. By using these IDs, I'm going to determine which button is clicked. Either show info is clicked or store info. So I'm going to use case r.id.btn show information. Okay, case r.id.btn store information. Okay, I'm going to break it, and if no button is clicked, default break it. So whenever the user clicks on the show information, so I'm going to get the data from the default shared preferences. So I'm going to create a method as the name of display. Okay, I'm going to create this method inside this class. Okay, how can I get data from this preference screen? As I've told you before, all of data and configurations that user has done in here are going to be stored inside a default shared preference. To have access to that default shared preference, so I'm going to create an object of preference manager in here. Preference manager dot get default shared preferences. Okay, so now I have access to our default shared preferences. So I have to put the context main activity.this, which is this class. Okay, now I'm going to store the data inside a shared preferences. Till now I haven't created the preference screen. I'm going to create the preference screen. The preference screen must be put inside the XML folder that I'm going to create in here. Click on res and click Android resource file. Okay, and name it whatever name you can give, or you can give your favorite name. I'm going to name it pref, and I'm going to put it inside XML file, and it is root element should be preference screen. Now click OK. Now you can see a preference screen is created inside the XML folder. If I'm going to text, you can see it is preference screen. So now I'm going to create a title and put it inside a preference category. So in here I have got two categories. One is login information, another one is settings. In the login information, I'm going to get the username and password from the user, and in the setting category, I have provided a checkbox in here and the language. So whenever the user click on the language, a dialog pops up like this. So I'm going to create a edit text preference. So make sure that you give key. Okay, title, summary. Okay, so whenever I click on the edit text, a dialog pops up. Before doing that, make sure that you set the title. Title is this one. Okay, this username which I have written in here, and the summary is this one. I'm going to choose a key for this, edt username. Okay, and I'm going to choose a title for this username. Sorry about this, I'm going to create a preference. I'm going to cut this one. I'm going to create a preference category. Okay, I'm going to give it a title as the name of login information, and I'm going to put the edit text in here. Okay, so the summary in here is please enter your username here. Okay, whenever the user clicks on the edit text, a dialog pops up. So we must also set a dialog title for this. So I'm going to click a dialog title, enter your name. Okay, now I'm going to create another edit text preference. Make sure that you provide key, title, summary, dialog title, and close it. So the key for this one is edt password, and the title for this one is password, and the summary, which is description, enter your password. Okay, and the dialog title should be enter your password. So I'm going to create another preference fragment, preference category. Sorry about this. Preference category, title, and I'm going to name it as settings. You can also see in this part. I'm going to zoom this one so you can see it very well. So I've created a settings, and inside this I'm going to create a checkbox. Everything has a suffix preference, checkbox preference. Okay, make sure that you provide key, title summary, okay, and the default value. The key for this should be checkbox. Title for this one, keep me logged in, okay, and the summary should be on or off, and the default value should be true, which is checked by default. Now I'm going to create a list preference. It is like a list view inside an activity. List preference, choose title, okay, make sure you first choose key, title, summary, and make sure that you choose entries, which is label, and entry values, which are what is the difference between the entries and the entries value. So I'm going to close this one, and the key should be list, title should this one, language, the summary should be choose your phone language here. So in here it requires an array of string, so I'm going to create a string value in here. Make sure right click on it and name it array, okay, and click OK. And inside this one I'm going to create a string array, name it as list language, okay, and choose item for this. I'm going to name it as, choose an item as Dari or Farsi, okay, Pashto, English. Now these are labels, okay, and for each label I'm going to choose a value, okay, and for that you also need to create a string of array. Name this list language values, okay, it is list language. These are labels, okay, labels. I'm going to do it like this so you can clearly understand them. So these are the value for Dari Farsi, which is label, and for that label we have this value or this item, and etc. So now let's go to our preferences screen. Inside our entries we must pass our array, okay, we must pass labels in the entries, okay, labels, and in the entries we must pass list values, okay, you can see it here. So now I'm going to review it. We have created a preference category, okay, it is a category. We have got two, I have divided my screen into two categories, login information and settings, by using the preference category tag, okay, and I have created two edit text preference, and I choose a unique key for this one because whenever we want to retrieve information from this preference screen we are going to use these keys to get the data. And I've choose a title, which is this one, username, and summary. You can also see the description in here. And the dialog title, whenever I open the username it has a dialog title as the name of enter your name, okay, preference, and also created another preference category as the name of settings, and I created a checkbox, okay, if the user if it is clicked it returns true, and if it is not clicked it returns false. So I've created the list preference, title, and summary. We can also see the summary, which is description in here, and we have choose labels, and we have set values for each labels. So we have created our preferences screen. Now let's go to our main activity. So in here I'm going to get those data which I have already stored on the preference screen inside the default share preference. How can I get the data? So for that, for username we use a string, okay, username sp.get string. As I've told you before, now we need to get the key of those strings that we want to retrieve data from it. So for the username we have got that key in the username, so let's provide it here, and it requires a default value. Make sure that you provide it inside a double quote, okay, and if it didn't get the value, so we must put a default value in here. And for the password also we are going to use a string sp.get string, Okay, let's see what we have set for our password as the name of edit password. Make sure that you choose a default value for this one also. If there were no data stored inside our default preference, so at least we can get the default value. We can set our default value. And for the checkbox, we are going to use boolean check equals to sp.get boolean. Let's see what we have set for our boolean values. chcap box. Okay, and now we set the value as false, and now we must get the data from our list. Okay, we also get a string. So let's see what we have set for our list as the name of list. I'm going to put it inside a double quotation, and we must provide our default value. Now I have got all the data, username, password checked, and our selected language from the preference screen. So now I'm going to use the StringBuilder because it's going to create an object of mutable. Mutable means modifiable, so that I can modify it. So I'm going to use StringBuilder. Builder equals to new StringBuilder. Builder.append. Now I'm going to append username, so I'm going to put a break line again. Builder.append password. Okay, builder.append logged in. Okay, now we are going to use our check. Now we are going to put a condition in here. We are going to say if checked, okay, if checked was equals to true. If it was checked, then append the value as. If that wasn't checked, so I'm going to set not logged in. Okay, so now I'm going to provide another breakpoint in here. So let's append for our language list breakpoint in here. You might think that why I choose the StringBuilder. StringBuilder is a class that is going to create an object which is mutable, and we can also modify data. You can also see I didn't use a string because if I use the string object, it's going to create another object in the string pool, which it consumes a lot of memory, so I don't want to have a memory leakage. So now I'm going to initialize our text view r.id.showTextData set text data dot set text builder dot toString. So we haven't handled our buttons, so we are going to handle them. Register them to the onClick listener, which I have already clicked the listener object in here. Show info dot set onClick listener. We only pass the object of listener, which I've already created in here. So another is store info dot set onClick listener. So the goodness of this way is that so whenever the user click on the show information, it has the ID of show information. If it comes in here, it has the ID. So if the button show information was clicked, it's going to display the data, which is this method which I've defined in here is going to get the data from the get default shared preferences and shows it to the user. So if the user clicks on the store information, also it must open our preference screen. So for that I've already created a preference screen in here. So I'm going to create a class to create a link between our Java class and our preference class. I'm going to name it my preference. Okay, click OK, and extends this from the preference activity. Make sure to override the onCreate method if I choose the add preference from resource, the method is deprecated. So I'm going to create a class of preference screen, preference fragment I mean. So for that I'm going to create public static class my screen extends from preference fragment, and I'm going to override the method of on create. So now if I use the add preference object in here, it is not deprecated. So you can see it is not deprecated. So how can I access to this one? So I use the r.xml, which is the XML folder, and now I'm going to access to our file pre. So I'm going to add it to our preference activity. So I use the get fragment manager that begin the transaction and add it android.r.id.content. If you have created a layout, so you can also use our activity main. So I'm going to use the content, which is a default or built-in layout. So now I'm going to pass the object of new my screen, and now I'm going to commit the, so make sure that you add the activity inside the Android manifest. So I'm going to create activity, name it preference, okay, my preference I mean. That's it. Otherwise your app will crash at the runtime if you don't provide the activity tag inside the Android manifest. So whenever the user click on the store, so it must go to the my preference and open our preference screen, which is this one, okay. So how to do this? We are going to use the intent for that. Intent equals to new intent from main activity, sorry about this, main activity dot this, go to the my preference dot class start activity, provide the intent object. So everything is set. Now let's run our app and see the result. So as you can see, I have created two buttons, show information and store information. If I click on the show information, it's going to get the data from the default share preference and set the data in here. So if I scroll down, you can see it clearly, okay. Whenever I click on the show information button, it's going to call this method display information, which is here. It's going to get the data from the default share preference and set it inside username, password, checkbox and list. So there is no data inside our default preference, so it's going to get the default data and put it inside the username and password, and likewise. So let's see. When I click on show information, so it took the default data and set it inside the username. So you can see username default value, password default value, login not login, and default language default value. So now if I click on the store information, okay, which is here, if I click, if the ID of that button was store information, it's going to open our preference screen, which is this one, okay. So now if I click now, you can see it opens our preference screen. So whatever you do in here, it is stored permanently because the data of this is stored inside our default share preference. So I'm going to provide a username in here. You can see here the title is username and the description, please enter your name here, and the dialog title is this one, okay, which I've written in here, enter your name. It is the dialog title. So I'm going to provide my name here Ashar, which is my last name Ashar, and I'm going to provide my password. Again, I have choose a dialog title in here. So you can see enter your password, okay. Keep me logged in, yes please, and choose a language. So I'm going to choose Dari or Farsi. We can get the data inside many activities by using the default preference. So I press the back button. So whenever I click the store information, it's going to call the method display information. It's going to get the data from the default preference and set the data inside the username, password and checkbox, and you will see the result in here now. If I click on show information, You can see username style here, password this one, logged in, always logged in, default value 30 or 40. So this is it for today's video, and this brings us to the end of this particular video. If you are new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell icon so it motivates me to upload new videos. And if you have any question, just let me know in the comment section below. So till next video, have fun learning, and don't forget to share these tutorials with your friends. Peace out.